Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on this tour. This is the last session. It's about extending your SQL developer. And I'm a developer. I have written some extensions for SQL developer. Maybe you use some of them. And this is mainly also the reason why I do these talks, because I see that a lot of people are not aware that you can extend your SQL developer. So it's about time to show it that it's not that complicated as you imagine. You see here on this slide also a link to my blog. On the blog, I've already uploaded the talk. The PDF is available, and also the demo. The demo as a video. I will show it also here in the middle of my presentations, about 25 minutes from now on. And in this time, I'll be able to answer some questions. So don't hesitate, don't be shy, ask questions if you have them. I will answer them. If I don't have the time to answer it or don't know the answer during the talk, I will answer them afterwards. So let's get started. SQL developer, I think all of you know SQL developer, otherwise you won't join this session. So still a few words, some facts you already know. What I want to highlight is that SQL developer is there a long time, 15 years in fact, and it's really a feature-rich IDE for the Oracle database. I think it has the most features. It's not, from my point of view, it's not the user-friendliest IDE, but it is really feature-rich. And a good thing about SQL Developer is it's based on JDeveloper, and therefore it is extendable. SQL Developer is not a single big fat jar. It's a collection of extensions. It comes with around 60 extensions, and depending on how you configure it, it has more or less. And it's free. You get updates twice or maybe 4 times a year. It really depends whether we are in Corona times or not. And so you should go and download the newest SQL Developer version. It doesn't make sense to work with version 4.0 or 3, whatever. Go and get the newest version and you have less problems. If you still have problems, open an SR, you are entitled to do so. There is also an official documentation as HTML documentation or as PDF. You get it from the site mentioned here. It's also included in SQL Developer. So you find a lot of stuff there. Usually, not a lot of people are reading documents anymore. That's sad because the documentation is really good. It's about extensions, and there are a lot of extension possibilities in SQL Developer. You can add snippets, you can add code templates, you can add Java extensions, you write everything you want. You can add code generators, but this is not the topic of these talks. Could be other talks, but I don't have enough time to cover everything. The topic is user-defined extensions in SQL Developer, and you write them based on XML. XML, there are schema definitions for these user-defined extensions, but this talk would be very boring if I go through the schema and explain what you can and what you cannot. I will show that based on examples. But still, the schema is important for the details if you want to, but you see also the similarities between these 4 types of user-defined extensions. You have reports and editors, and you see they are based on display XSD, and it includes a query XSD. And this is absolutely the same for reports and editors. They are quite similar, and therefore I will spend some time explaining reports, because they are really more or less the same. And then we have 2 other things. We have Navigators, which is a separate schema, but it includes a large XSD query, which is the same here. So you have a lot of similarities in these 3. And the last one, Actions, is something different, but this schema has a lot of useful comments. in fact, also examples, so it's worth to look at it. It's here in the Oracle DB examples Git repository. Look at it after this session, of course. So let's get into reports. I guess all of you have already run some of the reports. I have two examples here. On the left side, you see application XPath reports, pages. Here are some pages, and below you see details. So that's a parent-child report with a lot of childs, 6, I guess. And on the right side, you see an S statistic as a chart. So when you want to extend SQL to developer, the question is, can I add something here? Is that possible? And the answer is yes, you can, but that is only possible when you do a Java extension. It's a lot of XML in this Java extension, but still you will need a bit of Java to make that possible. But what's possible with XML is to extend these shared reports. That's a node here, which is read-only, and you can add these reports here as the first type of extension. And of course, there's an area where you can create your reports and edit them. This is under the user-defined reports node. So how can I create reports? There are different approaches. And one obvious report is I can start from scratch. I go to this user-defined reports node, right-click and select new report. And then a wizard pops up and I answer all the questions and fill in the stuff I need, and I'm done. But that's a bit cumbersome, especially if you have good examples. There are a lot of existing reports, and you may browse through these existing reports and say, yeah, this one looks quite similar. I'd like to copy it. So you can go to an existing report, any of these existing reports, in fact, right-click and say copy. And as the next step, you go to this user-defined reports node and say paste. And then you say edit the report and do the changes you want to do to match your requirements. And there's a last option to create the report that's possible of every single result table you have. So these table grids you see in SQL Developer at various occasions, you can go there, right click, and you see an option which says save grid as report. And when it's just a query result, you just get the query saved as a report. But when it is more, you get all the information in that report and may edit them. So that's creating reports. What styles do we have? I don't want to go to everything. We already have seen table and charts, but there's more. You can also make a gauge chart and so on. What I would like to highlight is this thing here. That's script. It's also possible to write reports which are based on SQL Plus scripts, the output of a SQL Plus script, or in fact, a SQL CL script, which is more or less the same, but more powerful. So you can, in fact, execute here SQL CL scripts. Okay, based on the style I change here, I get some additional properties to fill in. So the next thing, based on what I have chosen, when I chosen a table report, then I fill in here a query. When I chosen a script, then I fill here in a SQL CL script, or an anonymous block when I chosen anonymous block as execution. And that's it. That's everything you need for a report. The rest is optional. There's an additional checkbox here, which is interesting if you are writing reports based on the Oracle Data Dictionary, because you know the Oracle Data Dictionary changes with every version. You get additional fields and so on. And it's not necessary to create an additional report and call it report 18C, report 19C, report 11, whatever. You can incorporate everything in the report itself and say the query looks that way from version whatever until 11, and from version 2 where I have additional fields, I can change the query. So it's very neat to have it configured that way. But feasible only for the data dictionary views. And of course, SQL Developer uses that stuff itself. Then when you are writing a table report, there are some tricks to enhance this table report. One of these tricks is to navigate to other database objects, to add such a context menu, like here, go to depth. I'm here positioned on a column and would like to go to the depth. And I add that by adding some additional columns to the report. When the report contains these three columns, SDF, link owner, link type, and link name, these columns will be hidden and they will be used to navigate to that object you are selecting here. That's a nice feature. Even nicer, I think, is to create something similar. That's a hyperlink column. So you define here a certain type of column, starting with the content with SQL-dev.link, and then you define the object owner, object type, object name, and based, if it's interesting, for example, for pure SQL code or so, it's interesting to jump to a certain line or even to a line column combination, and you may add them. And you may add here a name, how does it look like, this link there. So it's easier to navigate to this other editor. And what's nice here, what you see, you typically just have to use in XML user-defined extension this hard-coded Java class. But in fact, it's a dynamic Java class. If you're writing extensions with Java, you are able to write your own class here and create your own drill-down functionality, and you get the idea that the extensibility of SQL Developer is really great. Then we have gauge columns. I think you know them probably from some table space reports where the table space is shown as, it has free space. No, it doesn't have free space. That's also possible with such a pseudo column. So when SQL Developer fetches the result, he finds out, there's a column like that, starting with SQL Dev gauge, and then it will change it to this type. That's nice. Then, of course, if I have reports, I usually just don't query everything. I'd like to enter some parameters, and these parameters are called binds. These are bind variables, in fact, and you can add as many as you like. You define a name, a prompt, a default value, and a tooltip. Sorry, that's it. There's nothing to enhance a list of values dialog, something like that. That's not possible, but at least you can define a default value. That's quite good. And then you have the ability to write parent-child reports. We've seen that previously, that this Apex example with 6 childs. And it's quite easy to write that because every result column of the parent query can be used as a bind variable. I just use a column, and in uppercase, I have to really use uppercase, otherwise it doesn't work. You have to use uppercase. Every column is a potential bind for the child report. Then we have drill down reports. Drill down reports are similar, but without limits, let's say it that way. You cannot write the report with this parent-child, grandchild report, something like that. But you can drill up from columns to the table, from the table to the columns, and so on and so forth. There's no limit in drilling through your environment by drill down reports. They are quite similar. It just adds a context menu for your drill down target report. And then we have PDF settings. So this is not really that important. I put in that slide because of the second bullet point. You have the possibility when you have a report which is based on a table grid that you can export the result to comma separated values file, to delimited file, to a JSON file, to XML, as insert or loader, even to Excel or HTML. And PDF is one option where you can define some properties like title and so on. So these are the definition behind the scene. So it's quite powerful out of the box, a report. When I have created such a report, I can export it. I have defined it within a special area within the SQL developer. I come to that two slides later. And I can save it as a single XML file. I can save a single report. I can save a folder containing reports. I can save a folder containing folders and folders and folders with reports, and have everything in one file. For distributing a set of reports, a single file is quite good. For managing them, creating new reports, it's probably easier to have it per report and then manage that stuff in a version control. The other operation is to import the report. Open is not really the right naming. You just put it in your user-defined reports area. And this area here, where everything is stored, is a file called userreports.xml. And this userreports.xml is saved in your IDE pref dir. And you say, hey, Philipp, what's IDE pref dir? And say, I don't know. It's based on your environment, on your personal, on your username there. But you can look it up. You can go into an About dialog. And there in the About dialog, you have the properties. And I can query them. IDE.pref.dir, and you see I found them. So I can go there and copy it and then do a CD. Okay, the whole row is copied, but you get the idea. So I can go there and do an ls, and there I find this user reports.xml. So there is everything saved. And this file is valid for all installation of your SQL developer. So if something is wrong there, then something is wrong everywhere. But it's a nice feature, and it's important to know that this is not just for a single installation. This file is for all your installations. Here's a report, a really simple report, which just does a select star from all objects with an order by clause. And you see here that it is style of table and that the result is horizontal, so one row per row. And the PDF stuff is not shown here because it's not so important. It's a good way to edit reports, especially if you have long queries. It's much easier than to work in the GUI. So that's basically the stuff we work with. When you want to install a report, make it available under the shared reports node. Then you go open the preferences, go to the user defined extensions, add a line here, say the type is report, and the path, the full path to the file where this XML report files is defined. And in fact, it can contain a lot of reports, not just one, like in this example. After doing that, you have to restart the SQL developer because SQL developer reads this information once, and therefore you have to restart it. Editors. What are editors? Maybe you remember that they are quite similar to reports. So what are they? If I have here a connections window and I double click here or click it depending on how you have configured your SQL developer, it opens up here the details. And every register here, which is highlighted, every register here is called an editor. Currently, the constraints editor is active, and if you look closely to this editor, you see that this is in fact the parent-child report. So the definition behind the scene is nothing else than a report which is executed based on the point where I call the details in the connections window. There's another option to open such an editor. You can be in the editor in a worksheet or in the PL SQL editor and navigate to an object type. The parser identifies the type, and then you right click and pop up describe. It's at the very bottom of this menu, and then dedicated window opens with all associated editors. Here again, the same constraint window as we've seen before. So what are the differences between editors and reports? I highlighted them here in this slide. Reports do have an ID. The ID they need for the bind variables. When I run a report, I have default bind variables provided in the XML file, but I may change them. These changed variables are saved separately somewhere in the preferences in SQL Developer based on this ID. They are not saved in the XML report. So when I rerun the report, my last entries are shown up. Therefore, this ID is important. The next difference is the type. Reports do not have a type. Editor have the type of editor. That's the difference. And the last thing I have to define for editors, which is not relevant for reports, are the list of object types this editor is associated with. So this editor is associated with the tables, with view, with package and package body. When I double click there, the details in the connection window, something will be shown up for them, but not for others. These are the differences. Everything else is identical. So therefore, the reports are really important. What are the object types you may use? Basically everything. You get a list on the GitHub. That's not that important to go through. What are the binds variable you get? Obviously, this information based on the connection tree I am. I have an owner that's based on the connection, and I have an object type also on the connection tree and the name. Of course, when I'm just positioned on the time, then the name is empty. So, or even I can run a report based on the owner on the top folder, and then these things are empty. So I can write the query considering the null values, and that's it. So there is no pop-up coming up for entering parameters. You have just a set of parameter binds which are provided by SQL Developer for you, and you may use them. An interesting aspect is for editors that there is a Dba View Optimization. Maybe you know when you are on large schemas, these large databases, in fact, with a lot of objects and a lot of users, these all objects views are a bit slow. And they are slow because they have to filter out the objects you are entitled to see. And this filtering costs a bit of time. So if you have DBA rights or the rights to the DBA object of this, in this case, DBA objects or whatever the view is, then SQL Developer will rewrite that statement and will access the DBA one instead of the old one. It makes the things a bit faster. Installation is again the same as we've seen before. You may make an additional entry for editors and define the property files where it is. And of course, SQL Developer must be restarted so the change may be applied. So it's time for the demo. As I said, I will show right now a video, and during that time I will look in the Q&A and answer some questions. So.
Okay, let's look at some user-defined extensions. I have here the connections window, and when I click on a table, I get the details. The details with a lot of editors, and here's the properties editor. That's a user-defined extension which shows some details in a table grid in a vertical representation. I have a second user-defined extension. That's the result of Daniel Porter's ashtop script. That's a SQL Plus or better SQL CL script. And it does not really make sense to define that on a table level, but it shows what's possible, what you can do. It's not only a table representation, you can also show the result of a SQL CL script. I can do the same for the views. Click on views, and here I get the properties, some detailed information from the data dictionary. What's missing here is the ashtop script results. Why? I'll show you that later. Let's look at the last object type, package. I get here also my properties user-defined extension, but this time the properties are not vertically visualized. They are shown as a normal record, the default representation of a table grid. And when I look for the ashtop, it's not at the end, it's somewhere in the center, in the middle. And when I click on it, it doesn't work. I consider that a limitation or a bug, whatever you like. It doesn't work. But there's another option to open associated editors who can do that from a worksheet. Let's try that for a table, for example. I click on pop-up describe, and I then get a new window. In the new window, all my associated editors are shown, also my user-defined ones, properties, and ashtop. I can do the same for Dba Util, which did not work previously. And this time I get all my results. It looks good. I get the vertical representation and also the ashtop. So where is the stuff defined? That's in the preferences on the user-defined extensions. Here, oops. Of the ashtop and the properties definition as type of an editor, and they are read from a local file. In fact, I store here in this directory clone of my GitHub repository. You may get your own clone of this GitHub repository. It's public, and try out the stuff yourself. A question I get a lot is, does it make sense to store all these user-defined extensions on a shared drive? You can do that, but it's dangerous. If SQL developer doesn't find these files, it crashes and it won't start. So for a laptop which doesn't have access to the shared drive, this is not a good idea. So I will recommend really to read user-defined extensions from a local drive. If you want to synchronize them, use version control or rsync or whatever. Okay, let's look at the details of these files. How are they defined? Let's look at the properties first. These are the type. This is a type editor. The representation is a table grid, and a detail of the representation is vertical. And you see here the result is limited to a single row because I have object owner, I have object type, and object name as selection criteria. So it's not possible to get more than one row. So it really makes sense to choose a vertical representation. What I see here also is a lot of object types are associated with this editor. So I get it for view, I get it for table, I get it also for package. There's virtually no limitation. You can associate them with all nodes if you like. Let's look at the ashtop. The hashtop is also of type editor, but this time the style is not table, it is a script. So the result is of a SQL script. And it has a list of object types, but it is much smaller. It's only table and package and no view. So because of the missing view, when I clicked on the view, I did not get the result of the hashtop script. That was the reason. But what I see here is table folder. So it's also possible, I show that, to define something on a folder. And when I click here open, the table result is shown, and here's a second editor. This is my user-defined extension, which is associated on that level. When I look here at the script, I see that I go to a hard-coded directory and I call the script with hard-coded values. Usually when I have a script, it doesn't really make sense to define a hard-coded value. Sometimes I want to have the ability to change them, and that brings us to the reports. I've imported some user-defined scripts from TNL-Podder, in fact just 6. Hashtop is one of them. And when I click on such a report, SQL Developer asks me for the connection, and then I get a pop-up for every bind variables. Since I have defined default values, I just may accept them, but I have the ability, for example, to change the time and say I'm interested in the last 6 hours and run the scripts this way. What I cannot do here is change a report. I have to do that in the user-defined reports. So I'm going to import some reports, in fact the very same we've seen before. These are the 6 scripts, and now I don't want to run them, I want to edit them or at least show some values. When I open the editor for it, I see here the hashtop script with the hashtop report, which is defined as a script. Therefore, everything here is SQL Plus or SQL CL. And what I'm doing here is I'm converting all bind variables to substitution variables, named that way. So I can use the substitution variable tptdir, where is the directory of the script, to change directory. Usually I won't change that, but maybe I will change the other values as I've shown before, and I'm calling these scripts with these parameters. The advantage is by calling the scripts and not incorporating them, the script in SQL Developer, is that these two things are independent. So I can just refresh the repository of with TNL-Podder's scripts, and I don't have to change anything in SQL Developer. And I think that's neat. So let's look at the bind variables. I've defined some of them: name, prompt, default values, tooltip. What is interesting in SQL Developer, you may also test it here while you're editing a report. So I can click here on the test report. I get all these parameters. Again, when I use mouse over, I see some tooltip which says it's a date expression. I can run the report. It will be shown in a dedicated window, and I can do some changes when I'm not satisfied with my default parameters or whatever. And when I'm ready, I can apply it, I can save it, and I'm done.
Good, so I'm back live again. Installation of the reports that we've seen. So that was the demo. Now Navigators is the next topic. Navigators, what are these? So you are aware of the connections window, and this connections window has a tree, and this tree can be extended with nodes. And such a node extension here, as you see it for soft drinks, I have colleagues who would for sure choose their beers or whiskey. I have chosen soft drinks. It's silly anyway, but that's the idea. You may extend the stuff here. So how does this look like when I want to add such a node? This is the complete XML file. I collapsed only the SQL query, which I show you later. So it's quite simple. So it's a navigator, that's the outer tag, and then I've defined their own object type, so nothing like table or view, something else, and I call this object type soft drinks. These object types has a representation in a tree with an icon, and I can say, hey, that's the representation is a Oracle icons user, and therefore this is this user icon here. When you use XML extension, it is not possible to define own icons. You have a lot of icons within SQL Developer. You may reference them, but you cannot define your own ones. For that, you need a Java extension. And beneath the object type, I have a folder definition. So I say, okay, this type is put into a folder. And this folder has also an icon. It's the favorites icon. This is the star. And it has a label. The label is referenced as a resource key. So the idea is to translate that stuff and have that defined in the resource bundle. But it's not possible to define a resource bundle in an XML extension. So what we can do is just say, I want to have a reference resource key soft drinks, and if SQL Developer doesn't find it, it just shows that name. So that's good enough. Unfortunately, during the execution, we get some error which we can ignore in the log file. And then we have the query. The query is shown on the next slide. Again, this is quite silly because it's just 3 queries connected with a union all, but you get the idea that you can query whatever you want to incorporate it in your navigation tree. So we have here a cola, a Fanta, and a Sprite, and that's are these 3 shown here. That's basically a navigator by example. Then we have editors. So because navigator alone does not make sense a lot. What we want to have when I have the connection here, I want to click on a node, for example, here the soft drinks, and I get detailed information for all the soft drinks here. That's the table grid. But when I click on a single instance, for example, for the cola, I get the nutrition only for the cola, and I get a second tab for the ingredients, and I see what's part of it. So that's the idea, and these are editors, and editors are reports, and that we have covered before, and therefore you see also why reports are that important when you write SQL extensions for SQL Developer based on XML. Installation is the same thing, it's just the type navigator. And what I haven't said before, you can have unlimited nested tree defined with XML extensions. But the tree depth is hard-coded. It's nothing dynamic as with the empty depth, you have a dynamic tree. It's hard-coded. And when you're fine with it, then it's all good. When you need a dynamic tree, then you need a Java extension. Actions. Actions are one of my favorites. It's the most powerful XML extension, and I show you what it is. Let's do everything by example to make things simple. Consider I'd like to copy a table. I'd like to copy table function. I would like to add here an own context menu entry, which says create table as select, and then a pop-up comes up. I'm here in a tree and I know I'm connected to Scott, table bonus, that's what I'm here selected, the table depth, not bonus, Scott depth. And then I have some parameters I'd like to enter. I enter parameter depth 2, that's a copy of depth, and I want to copy 100% of row, it's not that much, 4 rows anyway. And I have other options as well to sample, something like that. For large tables, this makes sense. And then when I apply it, it takes some time for that, not really, and then I get the confirmation box, the table has been copied. That's the idea of an action. So how does the code look like? It starts here with an items list, and this is the first item is defined for the type table. And it's important to know that you only can define one table. So it's not possible to define here a list as we have seen it previously. You have to define just one. If you want to have it the same functionality for views, cannot work in that case, but let's say, then you have to define a separate action. And then here we have the prompts. When I just define a label, then it's just a text entry. When I say it's a radio button, then the value is expected to be some kind of list, a static list with four values or 5. And then the last option is to say, I don't say it's a type radio, I don't say anything, but I still have a list, and then it's a drop-down box. That's the idea. And what happens when I press OK, the apply button, then I have the option A is to write here PL SQL code or also SQL code. That's also possible. So I have here dynamic execution of that block that I create here, and I have some bind variables, or better say some variables which I can put in here. And they are replaced. The notation is quite similar to that one we know from Apex. So it's object owner, object name. The type is not used here because we are working with tables. So we know the type. And then we have 0, 1, and 2 as placeholders. These are our prompts we enter. And I can place them and write the code. So I don't want to explain that PL SQL code. It should be self-explanatory if you take your time. Let's look at the other option. You have the possibility, instead of writing here SQL, you write here a script. In that case, it's not SQL CL. In that case, it is JavaScript. In fact, the Nashorn script. And what you are writing here is the code does exactly the same. But in the end, it's much more powerful because you can access every resource on your local computer, which is not possible from PL SQL, or not that easy. And you can access stuff on the internet if you like, whatever you want, whatever is allowed from the SQL developer environment. So it's very, very powerful. And in the end, then I have this confirmation dialog where I say object blah, blah, blah has been copied to blah, blah, my parameter. Again, I can define it basically on every object type. For every object type, here's just an excerpt. And I have placeholders for PL SQL and SQL, a lot of them. One is interesting here. Oops. One is interesting here, the object names. It's possible that you define a selection mode on the item both, and then you can do multi-selection and you select multiple tables and you just get the comma-separated list, and you can extract the values and do something fancy with it. So multi-selection and, for example, dropping tables, it's possible to write something with XML extension. JavaScript are similar, that these are just a bunch of JavaScript variables. I get access to the connection. I have a Dba util helper class, but in fact, I can access every class which is available in the SQL developer extension and can do critical stuff. So look at the code when you are going to import an action from some unknown source. This could be a virus. Okay, but it's powerful, like with everything. Installing, again, is the same stuff as before. But I'd like to show you this live. How does such an action work? I can go here, for example, for the depth, right click here, and let's say we do that with PL SQL, say emp2, 57%. And instead of clicking on apply, I can look at the code here. And then you see what it is replaced. And you see that silly code 75 is not equal 100, and there you get your code running. That's the idea. And let's look at the SQL, the JavaScript version. Basically the same. Let's do the same here. And when I look here and at the variable, at the result, then this is not PL SQL or SQL code which is executed, it's the JavaScript. And in fact, it is working. I can press here apply, and M2 is copied. So I have it here, but I don't want to have M2. I want to delete it. Maybe I get it done. I select here table and say drop and say yes, cascade and purge, and look at this dialog. This is in fact an action. This is in fact an action which is written behind the scene with a XML user-defined extension, which is just shipped with SQL Developer itself. So actions are really powerful. And that brings us to the core messages, and I'm almost in time, just 2 minutes overrun. So let's give me another 2 minutes for the conclusion. So I say everyone can write an extension, and I say that because SQL Developer has incorporated reports quite well. You have sample reports, you have tooling to create the reports within SQL Developer, and that's, yeah, depending on what you are doing, quite easy. Editors are basically reports, so they cannot be complicated. You just have to manage them on the XML file base. And navigators incorporate a bit the queries we have seen, and actions are really powerful and something different. But if you look at the examples I provide here on my GitHub repository, it should help you to write your extensions. And yes, it's fun. If you have questions, and there's a chance that some other fellow may answer them, then go to the SQL developer space in the forum and ask them there. If you stumble over bugs, open an SR. You are entitled to report bugs, and that's something the SQL developer team is not looking forward, but they are going to fix that. That's nice. So let's look at the Q&As. If you've got some questions. Until now, no one asked the question. Was it that easy, or is it just Friday, or I don't know? So don't be shy, ask. And if not, then thank you very much for attending, and I hope to see or hear or whatever, meet you in a more real world. Thanks.
We have a question.
Yes.
Yes.
Ah, I see. Okay. Can we make SQL Developer as read-only, please? So you mean that you cannot change anything in SQL Developer, or that what is executed? Maybe you should clarify. So the SQL Developer, when it is installed in Windows, by default, you cannot install Java extensions. It's a protected directory, but it's another story for the user directory. So it's not really read-only, if that answered the question. So Danny Schneider says it's Friday. Yes, it is. That's right. I don't want the developers to drop. So yes, that's a bit harsh. When I create the procedure, I'd like to delete them. So I want them to drop. So, but not the wrong thing. So the wrong things are in production, but in their personal environment, they can do what they want, in my opinion. The last question is, as the actions you mentioned are very powerful. Yes, thanks. I think they are really indeed very powerful, and in fact underestimated. And as Danny said, probably not a lot more questions because it's Friday. I have to ask Babu regarding the read-only stuff. I'm not sure I understood the question really. What how you want to make SQL Developer read-only. Maybe you can ask again. I will connect later. Okay, that's always possible. You can connect via my blog or via Twitter or via LinkedIn or even via email, whatever you like. Then let's call it a day, and looking forward for the weekend, and for some of you even listening to the next sessions on Saturday. Thanks.
Thank you, Philip, very much. There is also a question in chat window. Is there internet repository of SQL extensions?
Not complete. There are some extensions which are provided basically the developer itself. When you do the update, there are some optional extensions, but it's not maintained anymore. There is one on GitHub where I maintain some Java-based extensions, but for XML, I'm not aware of. So user-defined extensions, I'm not aware of such a repository. And as I said, you sucking in them automatically is dangerous stuff. You have to look at it. And if you write yourself the stuff, it's not that dangerous. But if you get XML extensions from an unknown source, I would review the code first.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's safer to write by ourselves. Thank you so much, Philip.